Residential Report Writing and Case Studies, Chapter 4, the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, page 18, URAR, page 1, Contract section. Did you analyze all sales contracts for this property? That's highlighted. If so, summarize the results of your analysis on the report. If the analysis was not completed, you must indicate why. In a contract or contracts where were not available for analysis, this is where you will identify the fact that the contract was not made available to you and the efforts you undertook to obtain the contract. If the contract was available for your analysis, is the contract signed by all the parties? Is the seller a relative, real estate agent, or employer? Is the seller on the contract a different name than the owner of public record? Do seller concessions appear excessive? Is the sales price significantly below market value? These are Fannie Mae red flags, and you are required to report the facts as you become aware of them in the process of analyzing the sales contract. Remember that in an appraisal report, USPAP requires the appraiser to summarize, that's highlighted, the analysis of the current contract. Simply restating the current sale price and contract date would likely not be considered a summary of the contract information. Contract price. For a purchase transaction, enter the exact sales price according to the contract. If the appraisal is for a refinance, the appraiser is instructed to leave this field blank. Some appraisers enter the abbreviation REF, or REFI, refi, in this field, which is not an acceptable entry according to the UAD. Date of contract. For a purchase transaction, enter the date of the contract. The date of the contract is the date all parties agreed to the terms of sale. If the appraisal is for a refinance transaction, leave this field blank. Is the seller the owner of public record? It is your responsibility to make a reasonable effort to determine and document the owner of public record. You may have to do some additional research to supply this information. If this information is hidden or you are unable to properly determine the owner of the property, the opportunity for fraud and / or misrepresentation is increased. Is there any financial assistance being provided by any party? That's highlighted. On behalf of the borrower, if the answer is yes, the appraiser needs to identify the total dollar amount and terms paid. You may need to question the parties to this transaction or view the entire sales contract for this information. End of page. Page 19, URAR, page 1, Neighborhood. In this section, we are providing information for the client's assessment of the property risk. We are rating the subject's neighborhood / market area. Do the properties in this identified neighborhood area complement each other? Do they share common characteristics, for instance, quality, style, life cycle, etc.? Note that race and racial composition of the neighborhood are not appraisal factors. Location. Determined by visual observation, if rural in character, you will need to further explain your decision and comment on the aspects of marketability for the subject. That pocket subdivision surrounded by horse farms but near neighborhood amenities is probably better defined as suburban rather than rural in location. If this is the case, you will need to provide additional support and explain the effect on marketability of the subject. Built up. Determined by visual observation, if under 25%, explain the effects on marketability for the subject. Growth. Determined by visual observation, if the growth rate is rapid or slow, comment on how the marketability of the subject is affected. Property values. Determined by data analysis. If property values are increasing or decreasing, explain the effect on marketability of the subject. Demand/supply. Determined by data analysis, if property values are increasing or decreasing, explain the effect on marketability of the subject. Demand/supply. Determined by visual observation and data analysis, explain the effect on marketability of the subject if there is either a shortage or an oversupply. Marketing time. This is determined by data analysis. Fannie Mae states that this is the average amount of time it should take to sell a reasonably priced house to sell in the neighborhood. If the average is over 6 months, further analysis and explanation are required. This relates to the typical marketing time that's highlighted for properties in the defined neighborhood. This is not, that's highlighted, an estimate of the subject property's reasonable exposure time. That's highlighted. 1 unit housing price/age. Determined by data analysis, the low, high, predominant price/age information is all based on visual observation and data analysis. Isolated high or low prices should not be considered when compiling this information. Explanations are typically required when the appraised value of the subject is significantly higher or lower than the most frequently found price in the neighborhood. Explanations may also be required when the appraised value of the subject is outside the high or low price range for the market area. Present land use. Determined by visual observation. The other block is used to identify industrial land use or vacant land area. Comments relative to the effect on marketability would likely be required if the commercial or industrial use is a significant percentage of use in the defined neighborhood area. The percentages defined here should add up to 100%. Neighborhood boundaries. The neighborhood is typically identified by man-made boundaries, streets, railroad tracks, highways, or natural boundaries, such as rivers, lakes, and streams. The boundaries, north, south, east, and west, should be identified in this section of the report. Neighborhood characteristics and market conditions. This is where we are starting to paint that picture and fill in the particulars for the lender/client. What are the benefits of ownership in this particular market area, and what appeal does this neighborhood have relative to other neighborhoods in the community? What are the average days on market for properties in this neighborhood? What is the ratio of closed sales versus expired offerings in this neighborhood? What is the absorption rate per month? How long would it take to sell the available offerings now on the market? End of page.